Greetings, and welcome to the Thirsty Mage, the podcast that's taking a cue from the Dragon Quest series and reinventing itself for a modern audience. I'm your named main protagonist, David Lloyd, and no, the Thirsty Mage is not switching over to a mature theme, but we are entering into a new era at the pub. As we mentioned a few episodes ago, Apple is introducing subscription-based podcast networks through the podcast app, and we here at the pub took that as a sign that it's time for us to start adding some new content on top of our RPG coverage. But before outlining how the coverage will be expanding, let me first say hello to my blue-haired partner in crime, Jordan Rudick.
And I'll tell you one other thing we're not going to do. We're not going to be doing live translating of a stream in Japanese ever, because that is that is atrocious. Oh my goodness.
That was distracting. I have to say, like, I almost wish they had turned off the audio, like the Japanese audio. Maybe if they just wanted, like, if they wanted to do the translation on the fly, then maybe just have the translation be the only thing we hear. I don't know. Or just
do subtitles for the whole thing, right? Yeah. I think the subtitles, when they were actually did the little snippets after the trailers with the developers or the creators of the games, and they just subtitles, that was fine. Like that's I think it's kind of what you expect, but live translating does not work. Like if it's pre-recorded and you finesse it and you polish it and then it's good. But I felt bad for the two girls that were doing the translating. It was just that has to be one of the most taxing things in the world. So I certainly I applaud them for the effort, but it just doesn't work. It's not entertaining. And if you want to advertise it as like a global simulcast kind of thing, like find a different way to make it happen.
Yeah, I think I would have preferred pre-recording with subtitles.
Yeah,
is probably the preferred way, but. Yeah, I gotta hand it to the translators. They did their best with what they had.
Yeah, for sure.
So this week's episode is going to be a bit of a short one, an intermission that we're calling it, before the launch of the new channel and things get back to normal on the main feed. But we just wanted to let everyone know how things are going to be working going forward. So the existing Thirsty Mage feed that you're listening to right now will continue as always, starting next week. So it's back to the basics. It's the same great RPG content that you're used to, whether we're covering topics or non-spoiler coverage of both new and retro games. And but what we're doing is we're just adding content on top of this. So we don't know the exact date as of this recording because Apple is secretive with all their stuff. So we're just kind of waiting for it's supposed to be this week. But once Apple does launch the subscriptions, a new channel that's called Journey of the Hero is going to launch as a subscription-based, and it's going to have access to 2 shows. So the first is a premium version of the Thirsty Mage, and what I mean when I say premium is that you'll get the episode a week earlier than the free feed, as in this feed, and it will also be free of ads. The second show that will be launching at the same time, it's called Abed Time, so the Legend of Hero fans are going to recognize the inspiration for that title, but it basically features the same folks that you hear on the Thirsty Mage, but the content will span across the entire video game industry. So episodes could include, the episodes that we have available already in the channel when that'll be available on launch will be, we have a top 5 list of the games we wish we would get a remake. We have a look back at the retro games that we grew up with and how they affected our choices today. We have a look at the past trends in the gaming industry and what trends we can expect in the future. And we even have an episode where we crown the official 7 wonders of the video game world. So future episodes in Abed Time will vary, and it'll likely include spoiler casts on games like Persona 4 Golden, SMT3, Nocturne. We'll probably have a lot of top 5 lists with a number of different topics, and it's basically anything that we come across that we think listeners would enjoy knowing about. So both of these shows will be available through the main channel, which is $2 a month, directly through the Apple Podcast app. And for the non-Apple users out there, don't worry, the Patreon is still available, and it'll include both of those shows, and it'll even have additional benefits on top of access to those shows as well. And it's all for the same price. So technically, the best deal is still through Patreon, but we know that not everyone either wants to use Patreon or can use Patreon, so this Apple subscription podcast just gives us another avenue to be able to give information, or give new podcasts to, so you have a choice of either one. So same price for both, but Patreon obviously will have some additional benefits on top of the shows. But for more information on how the Apple subscription will work, or how the Patreon works, please come join us for a conversation on Discord. The link is going to be in the notes, episode notes for that. Or you can even just email me directly at david@thethirstymage.com. But now that all the business stuff is taken care of, it wouldn't be a Thirsty Mage episode with the last call. So we'll be talking about the 35th anniversary of which is the Dragon Quest stream that was on last night. And we'll be talking about that right after this break. So we're back, and yeah, we're going to finish up this week's episode with a last call. And I don't know who stayed up late. I know Jordan and I both stayed up late to catch. I caught part of it. I didn't catch all of it, but I did get to see some of the stream, and I got to read up on some of the information this morning. And so Jordan and I are just going to discuss what our thoughts are on the future of the Dragon Quest franchise.
Yeah, you really only needed to catch the last half of the event anyways.
Yeah.
The first half was a mobile game and then 2 Dragon Quest X things. One of which is just, the funny announcement that Dragon Quest X is still not coming to the West. That they had a little snippet over the subtitles for that one. And then Dragon Quest X Offline, which may be coming to the West, but they didn't confirm either way if that's going to happen, which was it's just kind of disappointing. Like if you advertise this event to everybody, like at least tell people like what's going on. Like that there are a lot of people in the West that like Dragon Quest and are tuning in. So to not say on top of every trailer this game's coming or not, like I don't understand what the purpose of that is. So I get it, your Japanese fans reading this up for sure. But yeah, that was a little frustrating. But I don't know. I don't know, what do you think about the Dragon Quest X stuff, David, if you were paying attention to that or you saw the trailers or whatever?
I mean, I saw that there was going to be a Dragon Quest Offline, which I hope they come up with a better name for going forward. But I don't know. Like I know I know Dragon Quest X was an MMO, and I don't know exactly what that's going to entail when they do an offline version. Like it's one of these things. It's like I'm sitting here. The only thing I could compare it to is like Final Fantasy 14, and I'm thinking like, how would you ever make that offline? Like it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the experience to begin with. So I don't know if that's something that will necessarily entice me to pick up if it does end up finding its way to the West some point. But I guess obviously there's a lot of fans out there that are kind of resistant to MMOs, and I kind of get that. But I don't know. To me, I would prefer that they would just kind of focus on the future and not worry about that. But if it's not really taking resources from anything, then I know. I guess.
I got the sense that Dragon Quest X Offline is like, here, we've got all these Dragon Quest like storylines and bosses and characters and stuff like that. Like it's kind of a waste to just have it online and then just have it in Japan. So maybe it's about taking like those assets, those things that have already been created, and making them available to everybody. So I'd be surprised if that didn't come to the West, maybe a little bit later than Japan. It might not be a worldwide release of the Dragon Quest X Online game, whatever it ends up being called, but I'd be surprised if it didn't come everywhere. I don't know if it'll have multiplayer. It looks like it's definitely a different graphical style, maybe a different combat style as well. Certainly not necessarily what you think about when you think about Dragon Quest, but I see that coming out. The first game they announced during the stream was a puzzle game. It looks cute, it's a mobile puzzle game. Like it's kind of exactly what you expect from a mobile puzzle game. So maybe the less on this podcast said, the better. But the last 3 announcents were pretty big. One of which I don't think any of us saw coming. And that was Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. So kind of a remake of Dragon Quest 3 using the Octopath style graphics. Although the battle system looks different. It's more of a Golden Sun kind of almost an isometric behind the shoulder angle, which I love. I think it's a lot of style to that. I think that's really cool. So what did you think of that part of the stream, David? What did you think of that Dragon Quest 3 announcement?
Well, I was definitely excited. I know, like the first 3, I believe Dragon Quest 1 through 3 came. I don't know if you have to buy them separately or if you buy them as a package, but I know they are available on the Switch.
Yeah, they're separate. They're separate releases, but they've got those. They've got those ugly, mobile. The ugly mobile graphics. They're horrible.
Yeah, so I had really no interest in picking those 3 up, even though I do have interest in the game itself. But yeah, very excited to learn that they did the that graphical style, because it's one of the things I enjoyed about Octopath is that I think it looks beautiful, and it's definitely a style that's worth expanding in the back catalog. Like I hope this is something that's kind of going to lead to a bunch of different Square Enix franchises, or just something that they embrace in general. It seems to be that way with Octopath and then Triangle Strategy, all kind of looking in that kind of viewpoint. And then I don't know if it was scripted or not, but they did Yuji Horii did let it slip that they were looking to do Dragon Quest 1 and 2 in the same vein, like that. That's their goal, is to make the 2D or the HD 2D or 2D HD, whichever way it was. They were looking to apply that to 1 and 2, although he kind of alluded to that maybe they wouldn't be straight ports of the first two, that they would kind of play around with them a bit, which is there's nothing wrong with that, I guess.
I could see those being released as part of a package. Like if you think about the Game Boy Color, what they did was the Game Boy Color, they packaged Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on one cartridge, and then Dragon Quest 3 had its own cart. So I could see them doing something like that with the HD 2D style. Obviously Dragon Quest 1 is a very short game. 2 is a little bit longer, but 3 is the meatiest of those three first titles, and they do form a trilogy. So it would make sense to make them all, kind of bring them all to that modern style. It's funny their fascination with the first three games, though. Like, you don't get a lot of re-releases of 4 through 9. It's really just 1, 2, and 3 that seem to be put everywhere. I'm sure there's mobile versions of those and the Switch versions. Like I said, the Game Boy Color remakes for those games, and now these HD 2D versions. But I think that style looks so great. And we're talking about Square Enix, a company we talk about all the time, and they're notorious, I suppose might be a word for it, for remaking and doing more with a certain mechanic or style, right? You think about Final Fantasy 13 got 3 parts, Final Fantasy 10 got 2 parts, 12 got 12, and then the Zodiac Age version, 15 plus all the DLC in the Pocket Edition. They're not stranger. They don't shy away from taking a game and doing something different with that same game. So I think that's why we're seeing these kind of HD 2D remakes of maybe the older games. They're so familiar with those, and those are probably some of the biggest selling games in Japan, like those original 3 Dragon Quest games. So I'm thrilled about this. I did review Dragon Quest 3 on Switch. It's a great game. It's huge, actually. There's tons of stuff. You customize your party, which is really cool. The different job classes, and it's a really big world. With a lot of the familiar Dragon Quest tropes strewn about, different ways to travel around the world as well. So I'm looking forward to going back to it. That wasn't the only big announcement, at least for people in the West. What about I guess the second one was Dragon Quest Treasures, David? Is that right?
Yeah. So it was hard to tell. I'm assuming that was a Switch game, though it kind of looked like a mobile game at first. I was kind of like,
they didn't announce the platforms at any point. I think they said those are TBD. So,
well, and it even looked at first. I was curious if that was going to be like a Dragon Quest Builders 3, because I know a lot of people were looking forward to that, and
me too.
I don't think we heard anything about it, but that's kind of where I was going with that. And then all of a sudden there was this focus on treasure chests, and I was like, okay, this is clearly not Builders 3. Like, what is this? And so it would be interesting to get more information about going forward about that one.
Yeah, I heard some chatter on social media about that possibly being a Dragon Quest Monsters game that they had been working on a few years ago. But I guess that is not the case, or maybe they pivoted or changed. But it sounds, I think Corey said during the stream or maybe after, that there is still a Dragon Quest Monsters game in the works or in the planning stages or something. But this is totally different. I think it's neat, that they're doing another spin-off that is not necessarily the typical Dragon Quest form. That worked really well for builders. For heroes, the kind of the Muso style sort of game, I don't think that worked as well. I played a little bit; it was kind of dry. But yeah, if it can be anything like the way that builders took the Dragon Quest themes and applied them to a different genre, like I'm down for it. I don't know about the whole treasure chest seeking thing, but it's cool to see 2 characters from Dragon Quest 11 and see like younger versions of them, and maybe there'll be some lore or some story elements tied into how they grew up and how that connects to what happens to them in Dragon Quest 11.
Yeah, I'm curious if it'll end up being closer to like a mystery dungeon style gameplay or something. Like if there's like they're trying to make a modern version of that or something to that effect. Like it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
I thought for sure, like, it's screaming co-op to me. Like, you've got the two characters. It's kind of an action RPG style. You're collecting treasure, maybe going into dungeons. Like that seems to me, here's what I thought, and this is a horrible comparison, but I thought Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles when I first saw it. That style, like the drop in, drop out multiplayer, where you're going into like little dungeons and doing like a small quest or something like that. God, I hope it's better than that game, but we'll see.
I hope they fix the multiplayer anyway. If that is that's the funny part, is that the idea of it is still exciting.
Yes,
it's just whether they can actually provide you with the experience, like the setup, the way that the Crystal Chronicles works for connecting and playing in co-op. Was just horrific. Especially on the Switch. So if they've managed to fix that in a cohesive way that makes it easy to connect, then I would be excited. But
it certainly can't be as bad as that. And I guess this would be one of the first Dragon Quest games with multiplayer, if it does come to the West, which I would anticipate. So yeah, that's cool. We'll see how that goes. But obviously, maybe the biggest announcement for a lot of people, and probably the one that a lot of people suspected was going to happen, was the reveal that Dragon Quest 12 is coming. They showed us the title card. That's all I expected. We also got the subtitle. I think The Flames of Fate, I think it was. Any thoughts about any initial thoughts about that one, David?
It'll be interesting to see what happens with this whole like kind of pivot or moving more towards a mature audience. Like I hope it doesn't go too far in that vein, because to me, like, Final Fantasy has always kind of been the niche for that. So Dragon Quest has always been able to kind of be more towards a younger or just a more positive or inviting atmosphere, I think it is. So I guess time will tell where we go on that. The announcement that they're moving away from the turn-based combat was kind of shocking to me, because I always thought this was like the last vestige of where turn-based combat would be. Yeah. So the fact that even Dragon Quest is saying like we have to move towards a more action-based oriented, like I think it's going to be something similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake in the command turn-based style. And so if to me, that's maybe the most significant part of the announcement, is that if Dragon Quest is moving away from turn-based combat, I think this might be the beginning, the end for like the big budget turn-based games.
Yeah, I think that would be a big mistake, actually. I think that you're right. It's one of the last vestiges of traditional like turn-based RPGs. I think pivoting to a different combat style would be a mistake, even if it's just like the Final Fantasy VII Remake style, which is pretty different. You've got all these other Dragon Quest spin-offs that can have action-based combat. You don't need the mainline games to also pivot in that way. And again, if you're Square Enix, like, you have so much of your catalog that has already pivoted, whether you've gone more into the turn-based games with something like Octopath, or Final Fantasy, which seems to be moving more to an action style, and then 16, I guess, the more still action style like 15, and then 7 Remake, which is a combination of the two. Like, I get the experimentation, but I think people expect similar things in a Dragon Quest game. I think if those change, it's going to be a problem. I worry that what they're trying to do with Dragon Quest 12 with the simultaneous global release is to appease the West, who seems to favor less of a turn-based style. But yeah, if they alienate their Japanese fans, I think that'll be definitely a sore spot for the game, and I think that'd be a shame. I was going to say one more thing. He mentioned, or I don't know if he mentioned or I saw it somewhere, but the idea that Flames of Fate is hiding something about, or a connection to the maturity of the game, or the more adult theme, that maybe Dragon Quest games are pretty linear, right? Like, there's not a lot of like side quests and decision making and things like that. So I hope that when he says more mature or adult themed, it's like you have things you can do to change this world, that they adopt some of those conventions from Western role-playing games like Mass Effect, which we're going to talk about soon. But the idea, like, you can make a big decision and a part of this game world will change forever. Like, I hope that's what he's talking about, and not like it's darker, it's grittier, it's actiony, it's, there's more maybe sexual or adult themes. Like, I hope that's not what they're thinking. But again, it's tough because it's a translated event. We don't know exactly what their intentions are. It sounds like the game is well into development. They're probably, I don't know what part they're at, but it's not a plan. We're not in the planning stages anymore. Like this game it exists. It is in the process, but we'll see.
Well, the thing that's surprising to me is that I'm pretty sure Dragon Quest XI was one of the highest grossing sales Dragon Quests. So
yeah,
I'm kind of not understanding the motivation unless they're trying to kind of get ahead of the curve or ahead of the trend. Like maybe they think this was the peak and now it's heading down. I just don't understand where the appeasement of the West necessity comes in, because Western people are buying it. I almost wonder if some of the Dragon Quest XI success is partly because there's such a huge portion of people that still want the turn-based.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like if you kind of just stayed there, like people would come to it, because all these other, like even with Legends of Heroes, like they're moving away from the turn-based as well in their latest game that's going to be based in Calvert. So I don't know if it's one of these things where in Japan you have to move with the tide, and they're just worried that no one will want to play the turn-based anymore. But it just seems like as more fade away, I would think that the ones that are left behind will be able to kind of pick up the fan base that want those games. So you would think, and especially with like Octopath Traveler having such a big fan base as well, like there's people still want traditional turn-based combat. So I don't get why they keep going away. Like it's that, like you said, I think the only thing is that they might be so concerned about Western audiences that might be just what's really pushing them towards this new viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that that not that he misspoke, but that we're taking the words too far. Like I hope that it doesn't go as far as FF7 Remake. Even though I think I'd be fine. That's probably the furthest I've wanted to go. But I think that it could be something like, there might be prompts in the game, like maybe a timed attack and timed defense, like a Super Mario RPG type thing, or a Mario and Luigi game. It might still be turn-based, but just with some like small wrinkle thrown in that hasn't been in the series before. Like any change to Dragon Quest, the traditional Dragon Quest gameplay is going to seem major. So if they make a big combat change, it's really going to reverberate through the fan base. And I think, like I said, I think it'd be a mistake. So we'll just have to wait and see how much of a change they're willing to make. But we have seen them go wholesale change. Like you said, you mentioned Legend of Heroes, Dragon Quest, Yakuza Like a Dragon, obviously switched its action style for completely turn-based. So they're not afraid. These big Japanese companies are not afraid to do something completely different, even if their loyal fan base doesn't necessarily jive with it or hasn't been asking for it. So I don't know. I'm still super excited for these games. Like, don't get me wrong. It's just, now there's hey, we're all talking about it. Maybe they succeeded, right? They've thrown in these wrinkles, and now we're all talking about what that could possibly mean, and we're going to be talking about it until the games come out or until we see more. So they've done that kind of mission accomplished part of keeping it top of mind for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, content is king. So if the game ends up coming out and it's great, I don't know if people are going to really, whether it's turn-based or a Final Fantasy VII Remake turn-based or whatever.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if the game is good, the game is good. And I think that's what's going to be the most important. So I guess time will tell.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that'll be it for this week's intermission episode. So, like I said, if you are looking to get the latest Thirsty Mage episode right away, the Mass Effect episode is available now through either the patreon.com or it will be available in the Apple subscriptions. If that's, hopefully by the time you're listening to this, that'll be active, so you could be able to get in there. So you'll be able to hear right away our episode with Jordan and I on the first Mass Effect game. And but if not, if you're sticking around in the free feed, that's no problem whatsoever. You'll be able to get that Mass Effect episode next Sunday. So looking forward to the growth, and hopefully everyone enjoys the new content. But otherwise, we will see you out next week.